We're going to take a deep look at Texas's offensive roster today, kind of how they're set up for the future, 26, 27. Only going to touch on 27. Going to try to keep this focused on not this upcoming season, but the following. I'm going to be making a lot of assumptions in terms of red shirts, NFL prospects, all that kind of stuff. So y'all feel free to disagree if you want to reach out and say I'm maybe off base with anything. Feel free to reach out and let me know. We're going to start up front with the offensive line. I'm just going to make a quick note on the color scheme that I'm using here. The pinks are 5 stars, but this isn't necessarily that, 24/7 has a 5-star. I put them like that. I use that as the floor for dudes. I didn't downgrade anybody, but there's some guys that I watched the film. Might have been a 3-star, 4-star, and I thought they were better than their rank, so I upgraded them. The Blues are draft risks in this upcoming draft, so these aren't necessarily guys I think will be in the NFL, just guys that I have a good shot. Pretty subjective, so if you guys think I'm off base, if you think that it's more likely a dude will be in the NFL or a guy will be on this roster next year, please reach out. I just want to let you know, for the most part, I'm going to assume that the guys I list as blue are in the NFL, because I think that's kind of the smart thing to do when looking forward and trying to plan recruiting is you kind of want to assume the worst, so you end up in a better situation than if everybody does end up leaving. Anyways, looking at this offensive line going into 2026, there's only 2 guys that are probably going to start in 2025, DJ Campbell, Cole Hudson. Both won't be on this roster in 2026. So only having to replace 2 starters really isn't a big deal. I think if you only have to replace 2 starters on the offensive line every year, you're going to be in a very good spot. But outside of DJ Campbell in 2025, there's not that much proven talent on this offensive line. There's a lot of talent. There's just not a lot of proven talent. So there's going to be a lot of guys asked to play a whole lot more in 2025 than they have. And I think that's going to come with some growing pains very early. But I trust Kyle Flood in the long term to develop these guys and play the best players. I think you're going to have a very good understanding of just how good this Texas offensive line is early in the season, obviously opening up at Ohio State. I think that Sunday after that game, you're going to have a very good understanding of how good this offensive line is for this upcoming season in 2025. And then that stretched over all of 2025, giving Kyle Flood a year to, identify guys that they do want to play. I think you're going to feel very good about this offensive line going into 2026, just because there's a lot of snaps to fill in 2025. There's going to be a lot of experience to go around. So I think going into 26, you're going to feel better about this offensive line than you do right now for this upcoming season. That's not to say that this offensive line won't be good in 2025, just that it's inexperienced, and there's going to be a lot of experience to go around. They've recruited pretty well. Taking a look at the underclassmen here, John Turrentine's the one blue chip prospect they have committed so far. Missed out on Felix Ojo. That's not one I'm really worried about. Great player, don't get me wrong. Just the price tag that Texas Tech is playing, I'm not even sure a quarterback's worth that. Offensive tackle, very important position, but really all the money he's getting for any one position, I just think that might be one that Texas might have been better missing out on, to be honest. But nonetheless, they did miss out on an offensive tackle there. I think that might be a position you see them prioritize going forward. They already have a lot of big names in this class, so you might see them kind of go after some offensive line depth going forward. But overall, I do feel good about this offensive line. I think 2025, I already touched on it. Just going to be a lot of growing pains, but growing pains is a 2-edged sword, right? There's the pain part, and then there's the growing part. And I trust Kyle Flood to foster that growth. Now taking a look at this quarterback room in 2026, we're just going to assume Arch Manning does go to the NFL. I know that there's a shot that he does end up coming back to Texas, but right now we'll just assume, Arch Manning just went first overall. What does Texas do with the quarterback position? Now, if I had to bet who's going to start first week at quarterback for Texas, I think right now Trey Owens is the favorite. Just a guy that's been in the offense for a while at this point. But moving on, you guys, if you have anything to say about Trey Owens, you guys let me know. Not too familiar with him. Very familiar with KJ Lacey. So excited to see this dude play. Now, it might be really down the line, because this is a guy that really needs to develop physically. Going into 2026, he'll have 2 full off seasons in the weight room. But, even that might not be enough. But as a quarterback, this guy has all the tools that you want. You don't see the athleticism on the tape just because he's really a pass-first guy. But when you do see him move, certainly has some wiggle to him. Throws with a lot of anticipation. Very excited to see him start whenever it is. I'm not even sure if it's going to be at Texas, but definitely a guy that I think is going to be a college football contributor at some point in his career. Now, Dia Bell, this is the guy that I'm really excited for. This is even a dude that I think we could factor in to the quarterback situation in 2026. Now, if you follow this channel a lot and you watch a lot of the stuff I do on Landon Duckworth, man, I'm such a big fan of Landon Duckworth, who just committed to South Carolina. But if you watch my videos, I always say I'm so close to saying that Landon Duckworth's the best quarterback in this 26 class, but I never do it, and it's because I really think it's Dia Bell. American Heritage, absolutely love this dude as an athlete. Doesn't have the same frame concerns as KJ Lacey, and he's a better athlete as well, in my opinion. A real threat with the ball in his hands, but that's not all he does. Just a very, a similar quarterback's quarterback. Just hits all the reads very early, throws with a lot of anticipation. I'm just so excited to see Dia Bell. Now, if I had to guess, do we see him in 2026? College quarterback is such a difficult position. No matter how good you are in high school, and no matter how good of a high school you go to, American Heritage about as good as they get in the high school ranks. So, especially the Steve Sarkisian offense, I don't know if that's something that Dia Bell can just pick up like that. I don't know if there's any quarterback in the country that can just pick up a college football offense like that. But down the line, I think this is the name that you get very excited about. But as for 2026, I'm really excited. This is a heavyweight battle, I think, and I think Trey Owens is the favorite to win this quarterback contest right now. But we'll see how KJ Lacey looks physically in 2026, and we might even be talking Dia Bell early in 2026. But I think smart money's on Trey Owens, and the reason is because it's so easy to get very excited about high school players when you're watching their highlights. Dia Bell, KJ Lacey absolutely lit it up, but the quarterback position ultimately comes down to the mental aspects, and that's something that just comes with time. Trey Owens going into 2026 will have sit behind 1 year of Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, seeing how they go through the reads, seeing how they approach the position, and then KJ Lacey will get 1 year of Arch Manning in 2025. That's just something that Dia Bell doesn't have the advantage of. So I think the smart money, like I said, goes Trey Owens early in 2026, and then we'll see where we go from there. But long term, I'm very high on this Texas quarterback room, and it's such a tough thing to replace two players like Ewers and Arch Manning, and Texas is doing it not only through quality. All three of these quarterbacks I think are quality quarterbacks, but quantity. They got three of them. So having three potential answers, I think, in 2026 is really how you replace a talent like Arch Manning going forward. We're going to flip over to the running back room now, and just for the sake of this video, we're going to assume both Trey Wisner and CJ Baxter are gone. I think one of the two will be back. Specifically, I think Wisner is going to be on this 26 roster. CJ Baxter, I think, is just such an NFL running back, just a rare skill set that he has. But for the sake of this video, it's also possible both of them are back, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to assume both go into the NFL. Jarrett Gibson's a top dog in 2026 in that situation, and that's a guy I'm so excited to finally see play college football. I think Texas having two guys over him is such a good spot for him to be on, because I think Jarrett Gibson goes to most places. He gets a lot of carries as a freshman, as a sophomore. You're going to be getting a very hungry and a very fresh Jarrett Gibson going into 26, and I think this is a guy with NFL talent. I've only watched high school highlights, so there's obviously a big jump that needs to happen, but some of the flashes I've seen of him actually playing college football looks like he has it, and I think this is a guy that we'll be talking about as one of the top running backs in the 2027 NFL draft once we finally see him let loose and all that. Now, looking at the sophomore class, Christian Clark, former 3-star. I know I kind of just skip these 3-stars a lot, and it's kind of hard for me to guess development when I'm not in the practice and all that. But Trey Wisner was a 3-star, so excited to see how Christian Clark actually contributes to this Texas running back room going forward. Ricky Stewart, also a 3-star, but watching the high school film, I upgraded him 2 spots to the pink color. I don't do that often. Very few 3-stars, very guys that aren't recruited as high. But I think Ricky Stewart's a guy that wasn't recruited the way that he was ranked. I think he's a lot better player than he was actually ranked. I think very explosive, very good long speed with Ricky Stewart. I think you're working with a whole lot with him. James Simon, another name we're going to be factoring into this 26 running back room. But Derek Cooper just committed. Now, you watch my Derek Cooper evaluation. I said I really like Texas putting him at running back room. And here's the thing with Derek Cooper. I think, in a vacuum, he might be a slightly better defensive prospect. But you look at what Texas has in the running back room and what they have in the defensive back room. They absolutely kicked ass on the recruiting trail last year. The amount of names they brought into the defensive back room that are probably similar positions as Derek Cooper. Now, looking at the 26 running back depth, I think he's more talented than everybody on this roster except Jarek Gibson, and that's assuming Wisner and Bax are both in the NFL. So I think it's very likely that Derek Cooper is going to contribute a lot as a true freshman at running back. I don't think we'd be saying the same if he was playing defensive back or linebacker, people were even talking about. So talking about value-wise, just as a football player, I think Texas gets the most out of him at running back, and I would not be surprised if he's the second leading rusher on this team in 2026. If you ask me this year in 2025 who has the best receiver room, I definitely think Texas is in the conversation. It might not be them, it might be them, but if you ask me who's set up to have the best receiving room going forward, who's set up to have consistent talent in this receiving room right now, I definitely think Texas is the answer. There's no other names that really come to mind, and there's going to be a lot of guys that I overlook right now just because there's so many of them. But we're going to start top to bottom. DeAndre Moore, a guy that very well could be in the NFL next year. He also could be back on the roster. Yeah, I hate to say it, I really don't think it's that big of a loss, and that's not because he's not a good player. I think he's a great football player. Look at all the names behind him, man. Khalil Lockett, absolutely love him. He's going to be a true freshman this year. Listed on the 2 deep. Both him and Dalen McCutcheon are listed on the 2 deep. Last year, they just recruited separators. That's what I think Khalil Lockett is at 6'2". That's what I think Dalen McCutcheon is at a bit shorter. Right now, Dalen McCutcheon, very good gadget player at 5'10". I think he's going to work on his route running, but as he turns into that, this guy's a very high-end slot receiver. Jamie French from Mandarin, another guy that's going to be very good as he continues. Not listed on the 2 depths on the 2 deep right now, so I have him redshirting, but also a guy that I think he would contribute at most schools. Texas is just so loaded at receiver. I'm talking about all these guys, and I'm not talking about Ryan Wingo, who could be one of the best receivers in 2026 if he's not in 2025. As a true freshman, so productive. He's going to have a very good year in 25, and going into 26, he's in that conversation to be one of the best, to be one of the many first round receivers in that draft. Emmett Mosley, guy coming over from Stanford, pretty good football player himself. Another guy that is probably going to have NFL attention whenever he decides to come out, but not even eligible until the same year as Ryan Wingo. Looking at what they've recruited at receiver in 2026, Jermaine Bishop, man. Does he play receiver? I don't know. He might be a cornerback. 155 pounds this kid is. He's probably the best athlete in the country, and so explosive. The change of direction, the long, just everything that you look for in a football player, and he's so good at both sides of the ball. This might be a guy, I don't say this often, but just looking at how they talk about Jermaine Bishop, we might see him on both sides of the ball at Texas, but whatever side, if I'm either coordinator, I'm banging the table to have this guy on my side of the ball. Willis, Texas, very excited to see him at whatever position he ends up playing. This receiver room is going to be very good in 2025, and then you look at who they're graduating in 2026. Quinn Merritt, Rennie Patterson, Hamilton McMartin, all guys that are walk-ons to my knowledge. So not going to be losing that many receiving yards going into 26, barring any transfers, which I'm not going to say any names specifically that will transfer, but with this many names, it's kind of likely that you won't be factoring 1 or 2 of these names in when it's all said and done. But just looking at who they have on the roster now and who's coming onto the roster, they're just set for a while at this position, and not only set to continue the dominance, but actually get even better as these guys continue to develop as athletes, physically and as football players. Just wrapping up with this tight end room, you can see that nobody's graduating in 2026, so you can expect a good deal of these names to be back on this roster. Jack Andrews, the guy coming over from Cal's first season, is going to be in 2025 in Burnt Orange. Very productive at Cal, so going to be interesting to see what he does this upcoming season in that lead role. Jordan Washington, another guy that's going to play a whole lot in 2025. Very explosive, really like his release for his size. Emery Winston, very interesting football player at 6'1", 250 pounds. Doesn't have that traditional tight end build. Going to be a bit more of an H-back. I just love seeing football players like this that don't fit any kind of mold that you're used to. And, these guys come around, but Steve Sarkisian specifically, I'm interested to see how he uses and utilizes that frame that Emery Winston has. And then Nick Townsend, a guy at 6'4", I believe he is, really like the physicality he brings to the football field. I think he has very high upside as an inline, as a bit more of a blocking tight end, but you see some athleticism also. So I think this guy I think Nick Townsend's the most talented tight end in this room. Not sure if you see a lot of them in 26, assuming Andrews and Washington are back, because those guys are going to play a whole lot and be pretty good in 2025. But when we do see Nick Townsend, I think it's going to be a very, very good tight end down the line. Just wrapping up, I think Texas is good, and I think they're going to continue to be good. I think the offense starts at the offensive line. That's why I always do them first. And to me, this offensive line's in a spot to be very effective for a while. They're only losing 2 starters in 2025 going into 2026, but there's a lot of experience to go around. They've recruited very well up front. I think that is going to do worlds for Texas. Just looking at quarterback and running back, I think you can expect some regression just because they're losing a lot of production. We're assuming they're going to lose a lot of production at both of those positions, but their offensive line is so good that is going to be better, I think, in 2026. That's kind of how you mitigate losing some talent at the quarterback spot and then losing some talent at the running back spot. They have good names in the wings behind those guys, but they just haven't played that much. I think Jarrett Gibson's going to be very productive, but behind him, there's just a lot of guys that won't have that much playing time going into 2026. Now, this receiving room is the X factor to me. Best receiver room in the country, I think, in 2026. Just so many guys. I think this is the spot that this is where you kind of erase losing some experience at the other spots, because there's going to be so much experience in this room in 2026, and experience plus talent, just very overall, just a very good receiver room. Tight end, another position that they won't be losing that much going into 26. So I'm very high on this offense as a whole going forward. I think they're going to be very good in 2025. I think they're going to be national contenders. Do I think they're better in 2026? It's a tough question. We'll see how we feel about the quarterback spot next fall, and then we'll give our decision next spring, and then give our decision. But you guys let me know what you think. If there's anybody I'm overrating on this offense, anybody I'm underrating. I think I covered everybody, but every time there's one kid that slips through the crack for some reason, wasn't on the roster, I just didn't just missed them. If that happened, please let me know. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. A good amount of these commits that aren't on the roster yet, I have watched. Off the top of my head, Derek Cooper's up on my channel, Jermaine Bishop as well. Watch both of those guys, so I'd really appreciate if you guys check those guys out. I think as a Texas fan, Diabell also up, very high on Diabell, very high on Jermaine Bishop. Very excited for what they're building in Austin. Thanks for watching.